The tow truck driver smirked as he hooked my truck onto his rig. Sorry, buddy. HOA rules. He had no idea he was working for me. It had been a long day, and all I wanted was to park my truck, step inside, and enjoy a quiet evening. But living under the reign of my HOA meant nothing was ever that simple. I had barely closed my front door when I heard the unmistakable clank of metal and the hiss of hydraulic brakes. I stepped back outside, and sure enough, there it was, my brand new truck being lifted off the ground by a tow truck I owned. The driver, wearing the same uniform I had personally approved for my employees, was securing the straps, completely unaware of who I was. And standing beside him, grinning like he had just won the lottery, was Arthur Vance, the HOA president. Arthur was a power-hungry control freak, the kind of guy who thought ruling over a suburban neighborhood was equivalent to running a small nation. He loved fines, rules, and power trips, and he especially loved making my life miserable. Violation of HOA Code 5.2, no overnight street parking, Arthur announced smugly, tapping on his clipboard. This truck's got to go. I folded my arms, keeping my expression neutral. It's not on the street. It's in my driveway. Arthur's smirk didn't fade. The rule states no street-visible vehicles left unattended for extended periods. Your truck is visible from the street, so it's a violation. You can pick it up from impound. I could feel my patience stretching thin. You're kidding. Nope. He handed me a pink slip. The amount was ridiculous. A $500 towing fee and a $250 HOA violation fine. I glanced at the tow truck driver, who was now finishing the final checks before pulling away. He still hadn't realized who I was. That was the beauty of running a business the way I did. I didn't put my face all over the place. My employees worked for the company, not for me personally. And right now, that was going to play in my favor. I turned back to Arthur. You sure about this? As sure as I am about enforcing the law, he said, puffing his chest like a peacock. If you have a problem, take it up with the HOA board. I sighed dramatically. All right then. Yes, I'll have to deal with it the hard way. Arthur thought he had one. He thought he had power over me. He had no idea what was coming. I watched as the tow truck pulled away, carrying my own truck like a trophy. I kept my expression calm, even as the other board members chuckled among themselves. Arthur was practically glowing with self-satisfaction. You should really read the HOA handbook next time, he added, walking off with the others. I didn't respond. I just pulled out my phone and made a single call. Hey, Carlos. One of our rigs just towed a truck from Westwood Estates. Yeah, my truck. No, don't bring it back yet. Just keep it secured. I'll handle the rest. There was a long pause. Then Carlos laughed. Oh man, this is going to be fun. Oh, you have no idea, I muttered, hanging up. Arthur and his little HOA cronies thought they had pulled one over on me. But what they didn't know was that this entire neighborhood had been sitting on a ticking time bomb of corruption and fraud. And Arthur was about to have the worst day of his life. I just had to play my cards right. For now, I let them enjoy their little victory. Let them believe they had won. Because soon they'd learn the hard way. Messing with me was the worst mistake they could have made. I stood on my porch, watching as my own tow truck disappeared down the street, hauling my vehicle away. The sheer audacity of the situation was almost amusing. Almost. Arthur and his goons strutted off, laughing amongst themselves, believing they had just put me in my place. What they didn't realize was that they had just handed me the perfect opportunity to unravel everything they had built. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my business contacts until I found the one I needed. Carlos, I said when he picked up. How many contracts do we have in the Westwood Estates area? Carlos, my most trusted operations manager, hesitated. None. The HOA has a deal with that overpriced scam company, Harrison Recovery Services. You know, the one that charges triple what's fair for impounds. I smirked. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Yeah, I figured. Give me everything you can on that contract. I need to know who signed it, when, and what loopholes I can use. You thinking what I think you're thinking? Carlos asked, amusement in his voice. Oh, I'm thinking exactly what you think I'm thinking. There was a short pause, then a chuckle. This is going to be fun. I hung up and turned my attention back to the HOA. This wasn't just about a truck anymore. It was about the whole corrupt system they had built. And now that I had a reason to take a closer look, I was about to tear it down from the inside. The next morning, I took a little trip down to the impound lot. As expected, my truck was parked right there in the front, a neon yellow "hold until fines paid" sign slapped onto the windshield. The clerk behind the desk barely looked up when I approached. Impound fees are $500 plus storage. No exceptions. I set my driver's license down on the counter. I'm here to pick up my truck. The clerk finally glanced up, eyes narrowing as she registered my name. My name. The same name that signed her paychecks. Her face paled. Oh, sir. I didn't realize. I held up a hand. Relax. I'm not here to fire anyone. I just want my truck back. She fumbled with the keyboard, trying to process the release, clearly terrified. Do you need me to call the yard manager? I shook my head. No need. Just print the release form. She did as she was told, her hand shaking as she handed me the paperwork. I signed it, walked out to the yard, and climbed into my truck like nothing had happened. I took my sweet time pulling out of the impound lot, reveling in the fact that Arthur and his HOA had no idea I had just retrieved my vehicle without paying a dime. This was only the beginning. That night, I met up with Carlos at a diner just outside of town. He slid a thick folder across the table. Here's everything we found. I opened it up, scanning through pages of shady financial records, questionable towing practices, and HOA contracts that were downright fraudulent. They've been running this racket for years, Carlos explained. Arthur and his buddies funnel all the HOA's towing business to Harrison Recovery, which overcharges residents and kicks back a percentage of the profits to the board. I clenched my jaw. And I'm guessing residents don't know about this? Hell no. They just think it's HOA policy. But technically, the HOA isn't allowed to profit from third-party towing companies. I smirked. So they've been illegally pocketing cash under the table. Yep. And if someone were to, let's say, bring this to the attention of a lawyer, or better yet, the community, Carlos leaned back, grinning. I chuckled. Oh, I'm not just going to tell the community. I'm going to make them regret ever pulling this stunt. Carlos's grin widened. What's the plan? I drummed my fingers on the table, thinking. First, we replace Harrison Recovery Services with our towing company. The HOA will think they're just switching to another overpriced service, but they'll have no idea they're actually signing a deal with me. Carlos raised an eyebrow. And how do we make that happen? I slid a document across the table. Turns out Arthur isn't as smart as he thinks he is. The HOA contract allows them to cancel and replace the towing service with a 48-hour notice. All we need is a few board members to approve it. And how do we get that approval? Carlos asked. I smirked. We give them an offer too good to refuse. We accidentally leak some info about how Harrison Recovery is overcharging them too. We plant the idea that a better company, our company, can offer them a sweeter deal. Carlos nodded slowly. So we get them to sign over towing rights to us. And then, I leaned forward, my grin turning devilish. Then we play by their own rules. 2 days later, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Arthur was furious, slamming a fist on the table as one of the board members timidly read out the new contract proposal. Why the hell are we considering this? Harrison Recovery has been with us for years. The treasurer, a nervous-looking man named Tom, adjusted his glasses. Well, it seems they've been, charging us way more than standard rates. Of course they have. It's how we make money. Arthur hissed. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. They knew what Arthur meant. They knew about the kickbacks. But now that it was on paper that they, too, had been overcharged, suddenly loyalty didn't seem so appealing. Look, Arthur, another board member said cautiously, this new company is offering us a much lower rate and better terms. We'd be saving a ton of money, and it wouldn't look so bad to the residents. Arthur glared at them, but he could tell he was outnumbered. He exhaled sharply. Fine, but if this goes south, it's on all of you. With that, he angrily signed the contract. And just like that, the HOA had unknowingly handed over their towing rights to me. I kept a neutral expression, but inside, I was laughing. Arthur thought he had won the first round when he towed my truck, but now the entire game belonged to me. The night air was crisp as I stood outside my house, staring at my driveway. Just a few days ago, this spot had been the scene of an HOA power trip. They had towed my truck, smug in their belief that I was just another resident under their control. Now, they were working for me, and they had no idea. I slipped my hands into my pockets, smirking. The first phase of my plan had gone off without a hitch. The HOA board had eagerly signed over the neighborhood's towing contract, thinking they had outsmarted Harrison Recovery Services. They had no clue they'd handed that power directly to me. Now it was time to set the real trap. The next morning, I walked out to my driveway and parked my truck in the exact same spot as before. I didn't have to wait long. By noon, Arthur and his HOA cronies were making their usual rounds, clipboards in hand, scanning for rule violations like vultures looking for prey. The second they saw my truck, Arthur's face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Bingo, he muttered, pulling out his phone. Call the new towing company. This guy thinks he's above the rules. Let's show him otherwise. One of his lackeys dialed the number, completely unaware that the call was going directly to my own company. Minutes later, a tow truck rumbled down the street, slowing as it approached my house. The driver stepped out, a familiar face, the same guy who had towed my truck last time. His eyes flickered with recognition, but he stayed professional, looking between me and the HOA goons. Arthur marched over, crossing his arms. This truck is in violation. Get it out of here. The driver hesitated, looking at me. Ah, sir. I gave him a barely perceptible nod. Play along. He cleared his throat and grabbed the tow hook, attaching it to my truck just as he had before. I kept my expression neutral, watching as Arthur smirked in satisfaction. He thought he was winning. I let them believe it for now. That evening, I drove to the towing yard. My truck was parked right at the front, same as before. Only this time, there was no angry receptionist demanding $500. Carlos was waiting for me, leaning against the office doorway. Everything's in place. I grinned. Good. Let's have some fun. Carlos walked me inside, where a laptop was open on the front desk. On the screen, a live security feed displayed the entire impound lot. But that wasn't the best part. The real surprise was the row of cars parked inside. Arthur's car, the HOA treasurer's car, 2 more board members' cars. They had no idea that in their eagerness to tow my truck, they had also broken their own HOA rules. I pointed at the screen, watching as a confused HOA board member arrived at the lot, looking around in disbelief. Let's see how they like being on the other side of the power trip. The next morning, the HOA board was in full panic mode. Arthur stormed into the towing yard, red-faced with fury. The moment he stepped inside, he slammed his fist on the front desk. What the hell is going on? Why is my car here? The receptionist, well coached on how to handle this, remained perfectly calm. Your vehicle was towed for violating HOA regulations. According to Section 8.4 of the HOA Rule Book, personal vehicles may not be parked within 10 feet of a fire hydrant. Your car was parked 9 feet away. Arthur's eye twitched. Are you kidding me? No, sir. We take HOA violations very seriously. Your fine is $500. Arthur's jaw clenched so hard I thought he might break a tooth. I am the HOA president. You can't tow my car. The receptionist didn't even blink. Sir, the HOA board signed the contract with us. We are simply enforcing the rules you approved. If you have a complaint, you can take it up with the HOA board. Arthur turned an even darker shade of red. And then, right on cue, I walked in. His eyes snapped to me, and for the first time, I saw it, that flicker of realization. A creeping sense of horror spread across his face as the puzzle pieces started clicking together. You, he growled. I smirked. Morning, Arthur. Lovely day, isn't it? You. This. You own the towing company. His voice cracked slightly at the end, as though his brain was rejecting the truth. I shrugged. Got to love the fine print. You really should have read that contract before signing it. Arthur's hands clenched into fists. You set this up. I feigned innocence. Set what up? I just provided the service you wanted. You told me to tow vehicles violating HOA rules. I just happened to enforce those rules fairly. Arthur seethed, his lips pressing into a thin line. Meanwhile, the other HOA board members had started to connect the dots. They stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to outright fear. What happens if we refuse to pay the fine? One of them asked hesitantly. I gave a casual shrug. Well, as per the HOA rules, unpaid fines double every 48 hours. And after a certain period, we can legally auction off any abandoned vehicles. Arthur staggered back like I had just punched him. Auction? You wouldn't. I grinned. I wouldn't. But the HOA's own towing policy? Oh, it absolutely would. Silence. For the first time in his pathetic little reign, Arthur had no control. He was trapped in his own web of corruption, and I wasn't done yet. I stepped forward, lowering my voice just enough to make sure only Arthur and the board members heard me. You know, the community has no idea about all the shady stuff you guys have been up to. Yet, Arthur's face drained of color. If I were you, I'd be thinking about how to fix this before the residents find out. The other board members visibly panicked. They knew exactly what I was getting at. The moment the residents found out about the illegal kickbacks, the fines, the fraud, there would be hell to pay. I leaned in just a little closer. And if you even think about pulling another stunt like towing my truck again. I smiled. Let's just say next time, it won't be your car that gets impounded. Arthur swallowed hard. He knew he had lost. I clapped him on the shoulder. Pleasure doing business with you. Then I walked out, my truck keys jingling in my pocket. leaving behind a room full of terrified, defeated HOA board members. The trap had been set, and now it was time to watch them squirm. Arthur Vance had always seen himself as untouchable. He had spent years lording over the neighborhood, collecting fines, enforcing ridiculous rules, and lining his pockets with kickbacks from shady business deals. But now, as he stood in the impound lot, staring at his own car being held hostage by the very company he had hired, the power was slipping through his fingers. And I was just getting started. The next morning, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but that didn't mean I wasn't watching. Through the live security cameras installed in the HOA meeting room, a small addition my company had installed when we took over the towing contract, I could see Arthur pacing furiously. His face was a deep shade of red, and his hands kept clenching into fists. "This is a disaster," he hissed. "We have to get out of that contract." Tom, the HOA treasurer, wiped sweat from his forehead. "We can't get out of the contract. We signed for 6 months. Arthur slammed a fist on the table. "Then we just void it. Find a loophole. Something." One of the board members, a nervous-looking man named Greg, cleared his throat. "The problem is, the towing company isn't technically breaking any rules." Arthur spun on him. "Are you kidding me?" Greg hesitated, flipping through a stack of paperwork. "They're following the exact HOA regulations we set. Every car they've towed, including ours, was violating a rule we created." Arthur's jaw tightened. "Then we changed the rules." Tom shook his head. "Not without a neighborhood vote. And if the residents find out what's going on." He trailed off, glancing nervously at the others. They all knew what he meant. If word got out about the illegal towing kickbacks, the unfair fines, and the corrupt deals, the entire HOA could be dismantled. Arthur slumped into his chair, rubbing his temples. "We're screwed." "Yes, Arthur. Yes, you are." Meanwhile, I was making my next move. With the HOA board too distracted trying to cover their own backsides, I had free rein to shift the power balance completely. Step 1. Give the community a taste of what life could be like without HOA tyranny. I started small. A few neighborhood residents had been fined for things like leaving their trash bins out a few minutes late. So, I had my tow truck drivers do a little extra work, gently moving trash bins back to their proper places instead of issuing fines. For the first time in years, people saw their problems solved instead of being penalized. Then I went bigger. One elderly couple had been slapped with a $1,000 fine for having their fence an inch too tall. So, I had a crew lower it for free and made sure the entire neighborhood saw it happen. The message was clear. There was a new sheriff in town, and unlike the HOA, I wasn't here to squeeze money out of people. I was here to help them. Arthur, of course, lost his mind. At the next HOA meeting, he was in full meltdown mode. This is a coordinated attack," he ranted, slamming a printout of a news article on the table. "He's turning the whole neighborhood against us." The article, courtesy of a local journalist I had tipped off, detailed the corruption and financial misconduct within the HOA. It didn't take long for residents to connect the dots, and once they did, they wanted blood. "We have to do something," Tom muttered. Arthur's eyes burned with desperation. "We can still fix this. We just need to." Bang! The conference room doors burst open, and a group of angry homeowners stormed in. A tall man in a flannel shirt, Dan Parker, one of the longtime residents, threw a stack of HOA fine notices onto the table. "We've had enough," he growled. "We're voting to dissolve the HOA." Arthur froze. "What?" Another woman, Mrs. Thompson, crossed her arms. "You heard him. We've got enough signatures to force a vote. And once we do, this HOA is finished." Arthur looked around at his board members. Nobody was backing him up because they all knew it was over. The vote was scheduled for that Saturday. Arthur did everything he could to sway people back, promising lower fees, fewer fines, better leadership. Nobody believed him. By then, I had already won. On voting day, the entire neighborhood showed up. Ballots were cast, votes were counted, and when the final tally was read aloud, the result was clear. The HOA was dissolved. The crowd erupted into cheers. Arthur stood in stunned silence. His entire empire crumbled to dust. I could have walked away then, satisfied with the win, but I had one last move to play. The next day, as Arthur packed up his office, I strolled in. He looked up at me, rage burning in his eyes. "You? This is all your fault." I smirked. "You towed my truck, Arthur." "I was following the rules," he scoffed. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Yeah, well, I rewrote them." His jaw clenched. "You think you're some kind of hero?" I shrugged. "I think I just gave people their freedom back." Arthur stared at me, breathing heavily. Then, with one final glare, he shoved his box of belongings into his arms and stormed out. As I watched him leave, I felt zero sympathy because this wasn't just about getting my truck back. It was about teaching tyrants like Arthur a lesson. Mess with the wrong guy, and you lose everything. The morning after the vote, the HOA was officially dissolved. The residents wasted no time celebrating their newfound freedom. Neighbors were tearing down the ridiculous no decoration signs, setting up lawn chairs on their previously banned porches, and repainting houses whatever color they wanted. It was like a festival, a community finally reclaiming its rights. Arthur, on the other hand, was losing his mind. He had banked on the HOA's power to protect him. Without it, everything unraveled. For years, he had been funneling HOA funds into personal accounts, covering his tracks just enough to keep people from noticing. But now, with the HOA gone, people started asking questions. And I had plenty of answers. That afternoon, I made one final call to my journalist contact. "Hope you're ready," I said, sending over a folder of documents. Because this is about to get a whole lot worse for Arthur. It was all in there. Fake invoices, unauthorized transactions, and proof that HOA funds had been misused for years. By the evening news, the story was everywhere. Ex-HOA president under investigation for fraud. Arthur's name was plastered across local headlines, and that was just the beginning. The next morning, I was enjoying my coffee when I heard the satisfying wail of police sirens. I didn't even have to look. I already knew what was happening. Arthur was being arrested. From my front porch, I sipped my coffee as I watched two uniformed officers escort him out of his house in handcuffs. The entire neighborhood came outside to watch. Some were cheering. Others just stood in satisfaction. Arthur, on the other hand, looked shattered. He locked eyes with me, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. "You," he spat. "This is your fault." I gave him a slow, satisfied smirk. "I told you, Arthur. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes." Arthur's face turned red, but he couldn't do anything. Not anymore. As the officers shoved him into the back of the squad car, I leaned back against my porch railing, watching the show. The same HOA president who thought he was untouchable, the same guy who towed my truck just to flex his power, was now getting towed away himself. With Arthur out of the picture, the real cleanup began. The neighborhood, free from HOA tyranny, came together in ways I hadn't seen before. Instead of being forced into HOA-mandated community service, people started helping each other because they wanted to. Dan Parker, the guy who had led the HOA vote, started organizing volunteer groups to fix sidewalks, fences, and street signs without any ridiculous fines attached. The overpriced HOA fees were gone, the pointless restrictions were gone, and best of all, the corrupt towing scheme was gone. Instead of a predatory towing system, I offered up my own services, but fairly. Instead of extorting people, I ran it on simple logic. Park in front of someone's driveway, you get a warning first. Blocking emergency access gets towed. Simple, fair, and without the HOA power trip. For the first time in years, people felt like they were living in a real community, not a dictatorship. And as for me, I got the biggest reward of all. One night, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Dan Parker standing there, a bottle of whiskey in hand. "Thought you might want to celebrate," he said, stepping inside. I chuckled, grabbing 2 glasses. "You know, I never expected to become a revolution leader." Dan laughed. "Well, buddy, you didn't just lead a revolution. You burned the whole damn system to the ground." We clinked glasses and took a sip. Dan shook his head, smiling. "I got to ask, though, when they towed your truck that first time, did you know it was going to go this far?" I leaned back in my chair, smirking. "Honestly, no." Then I shrugged. But the moment Arthur looked me in the eye and said, "It's just the rules," I took another sip. That's when I knew he had to go. Dan laughed again, shaking his head. "Well, here's to you, man. The guy who took down the worst HOA this town has ever seen." I clinked my glass against his, watching the moonlight shine over a finally free neighborhood. No more stupid rules, no more corruption, just a community living how they wanted to. And all it took was one towed truck. HOAs love to think they're untouchable until they mess with the wrong person. What's the worst thing an HOA has ever done to you? Drop your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more crazy HOA takedown stories.